Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Pro Soccer Talk. We are live right now. Myself, Joe Prince-Wright, over in England. Delighted to say, as always, I'm joined by Nick Mendola in Buffalo, New York, and Andy Edwards in Kansas City. And we are reacting to the USMNT playing against Saudi Arabia. It's in the very closing stages in southern Spain. It's 0-0 at the moment. So send us your questions on this performance, on this display. I think, gents, it's fair to say it's been a very disappointing couple of days and couple of games for the US. A bit of a wake-up call ahead of the World Cup. Just, 54 days away now until that all kicks off in Qatar. So we're about to find out a lot about this young US team, I think, in the days, weeks, and, well, less than a couple of months ahead. So initial thoughts, Nick, as time ticks away down in Murcia. What were your real takeaways from this game against Saudi Arabia?
Well, it's really uncomfortable to be in a position where you're kind of creating scenarios in which the performance could somehow be explained in an acceptable manner. And that's what I feel like I'm doing for two straight games. Like, is he not trying to tip his hand? Is he out there just playing as basic as possible? Does he not want us to think, or the opposition to think, that he's settled on his lineup? And I hate that it's all alternatives. I'm trying to come up for reasons why they look like they haven't played together before. Or they look uninspired or uninstructed. And there are nations, again, I'm not advocating this and they would never do it, but there are nations where guys get fired for stuff like this because the World Cup is so important. And so I guess to go back to what we talked about last week, Joe, overall, I'm just kind of feeling dismal. I'm feeling like I get, maybe, do the math, let's say we live to 80, we get to see 15 World Cups in our life if we're lucky, and I feel like we're about to waste one.
And the game is over, I can confirm now. Full time in Murcia, Saudi Arabia 0, US men's national team 0, and an injury hit Saudi Arabia about their starting goalkeeper, captain, a couple of their main defenders. Yes, the US had injuries as well, Andy, but this really wasn't the kind of performance you wanted to see after that demoralizing defeat against Japan and how bad that was, right? You wanted to see some kind of reaction from the US. And I think in the first half, we saw it with Pulisic and McKennie a few times in down the left, a couple of opportunities, but really just half chances. So Greg Berhalter wanted a reaction, wanted a team performance. I don't think we saw that tonight against Saudi Arabia. Now, if I'm a US fan tuning in to watch us here, I'm intrigued to get your comments and questions coming in, everyone. I'd be very despondent, like Nick said. Is that how you're feeling too?
Well, I mean, 4 shots against Japan, 7 against Saudi Arabia. So, these are very, very small incremental improvement. No, it was putrid from the very beginning, and from the very beginning of the game against Spain. 11 shots in 2 games from a team that is supposed to be peaking now, heading into a World Cup. This is obviously not what you want to see. I do think that the injuries that they're dealing with right now are particularly troublesome, given the fact that Anthony Robinson, one of, if not the first name onto the team sheet once the World Cup gets here, as good as he's been for the national team and for Fulham this season. I also think I came around during this game further and further to the idea that Yunus Musa really is the missing piece in this team at the moment, because we saw the midfield with a double pivot against Japan. Tyler Adams had some help in there. It still didn't work because there was no ball progressor in front of the double pivot. Well, we switch away from the double pivot and it's just Tyler Adams in there. You've got 2 in front of him. And the fact that Yunus Musa wasn't one of them alongside Weston McKennie, I think is actually a much bigger issue for this team than anything anybody else is talking about, because it is the ball. It's not just the ball progression, but it's the retention as well. When they come under pressure, he's always there as an option to play them out of trouble. He is the one player that can get them out of those situations, and he combines along the left a lot so well with Anthony Robinson. So maybe I'm grasping, trying to find something positive here, but I do think that those 2 individuals specifically, maybe more than anybody else in the team, the impact that they have on everyone around them, individually and as a collective unit, I do think we realized how important they are in these 2 games.
Yeah, I mean, Andy, we have the same wavelength, because I've literally just written about Robinson and Musa in my What We Learned column, which has gone up on NBCSports.com as we speak. It's up there right now. So head over there and read that as you're tuning in with us, because, yeah, it just seems like the ability to keep the ball and have someone link midfield and attack and give the US some kind of fluidity and cohesion, and the gaps that were there in front of the centre backs and all over midfield Musa fills those roles. And then for Robinson out on the left, he's so adventurous. We've seen that for Fulham time and time again. And when you have players that you know can have quality and will keep the ball or put in a good cross, if you're an attacking player, a striker, a midfielder, that kind of incentivizes you to keep running, keep making those runs. But what we've seen for the US the last couple of games is a lot of attacking players Pulisic kind of went missing in the second half today because I think they kind of just realized, even if I keep making these runs, no one's going to find me. No one's going to feed me. And that's a really big problem. And Tim Weah...
And the space was there. That Saudi Arabia back line was super high. And anybody in midfield that can connect a pass, pick a through ball, there are plenty of chances there. And that was the most frustrating thing, is because you could see it. You could see all that space in behind. And the only way they tried to exploit it was from a center back to a fullback on the opposite side. A 60-yard diagonal ball, sure, it works great if you've got somebody on the other end of it that can do something with it. And they just didn't today.
They did. They wanted to play long, right? Long and Zimmerman, no pun intended. They just wanted to get them to play the ball long, in behind, get McKennie and Pulisic running, and it did not work. Okay, let's get to some of your questions. A lot of questions coming in. Thank you, guys. Okay, City's imaginary squad depth. It's not imaginary. They have a lot of good squad depth. Anyway, how much is on the system and how much is on the players? Nick Mendola, I'm coming to you. I guess this is kind of a question that we always look at with Greg Berhalter in mind, don't we?
Yeah. He's, again, unless we're missing something, unless this is, I don't want to give away something I've figured out. I know the Wales coach is here. The players have not benefited, or the players have not helped him in any way, shape, or form. But I have to imagine with these guys, kind of what you're talking about, the diagonal balls being cooked, Joe Scally coming in, as I think Andy pointed out off the air, if the plan was what we saw the plan to be in the first half, then he should be starting. And I think he's too stubborn to get enough wins, and he needs a reality check. Someone needs to sit him down and say, look, if you want to go out on your own terms, fine, but it's not going to be capturing the imagination of the nation. I would go scrolling through the stats. I always like to look at the stats to make sure in case I've missed something on the player ratings. And I'll tell you what, Dest's stats were pretty good. I think 6 of 7 duels playing on the left side when we know he wants to play on the right. Yedlin, I thought, was bright in the game. Zimmerman was better from Friday. Long was bad again. And I think if you keep trying to, you look at it, and it's the most obviously thing. He's a weakness. He's not necessarily even a top center back in MLS. And I hate dogging on him, but he shouldn't be starting a World Cup game. It shouldn't happen. And if he's starting with Zimmerman in back-to-back games before the World Cup, you're saying, I think we're going to start this guy. And if it works, it'll be luck. It won't be because he was right.
Yeah, there's a lot of great questions coming in around these topics, Nick, as well. So we'll keep it rolling. Andy, this is the big question. I think fans are so frustrated by what they've seen through qualifying, finishing third in CONCACAF, and these last couple of games, and sort of maybe Berhalter's general attitude. You can see the question I'm going to pull out here from Jonathan Rincon. Should Greg Berhalter be fired before or after the World Cup? I personally don't think it's going to happen before the World Cup. US soccer has totally gone all in on him, and at the very least, they're going to give him these 3 games. And if they absolutely tank, lose all 3, don't get through the group stage, then I think that's a legitimate discussion to have, right? He's had the cycle. He's had these young players. But what do you think? Is there actually a question right now? Because looking at the lineup today, he played a few players with the World Cup in mind, and I thought he would have given some of the other younger, less experienced players more of an opportunity today. But it's almost like that bunker down mentality, and he wanted to get a positive result today against Saudi Arabia, and he didn't get it. So is the pressure kind of on Berhalter now?
Yeah, it is. Is that a yes or no question or a before or after question? Because you can ask that a couple different ways and say yes, that he should eventually at some point, or is it a matter of when? I don't know that going to the World Cup and even, if they play like this at the World Cup and they manage to get a couple of results, that doesn't change a ton in my mind. It's not so much about the results. It's about kind of about the way the team plays, and it's not the style that they play with. And I think that is to something that Nick always goes to is, Berhalter being a bit stubborn and having to do things his way, and he knows the best way. I think he places way too much value and priority on that. And I think Americans do in general as well. And I think that was something that if you go back 4 and 8 and 12 years, kind of the World Cup cycle, timeline, we always had a team that could fight, that could counter, that was stronger as games went on, teams that kind of willed themselves over the line, the American spirit, if you will. And I don't know, we look down on ourselves, I think, at times for that, saying, well, that's not how the game is meant to be played. It can be played better, technically, stylistically, and everything. We looked at what Spain did internationally and thought, well, why can't we just do that? Well, because we're not Spain. That's the reason why. And so I think trying to do anything, other than being who we are, the players that we have in the player pool, who we've always been, I think is probably where he has gone wrong, or the most wrong, during his tenure as coach, because it is nice to say that we're going to play this way because he had some success doing it in MLS for a few years, and those crew teams were awesome. Credit to Greg Berhalter for that, all of those things. But this is different. And the fact that he's trying to play that way in the international game, we talked about it last week. It's just not how the international game is played. Make it as simple as you possibly can internationally. And he's trying to make it more and more complex, I think, with every single game, with every lineup that he picks, every tactical change or idea. It's just, I don't know. There's a lot going on at a time where you want to have everything settled and everything figured out, and still trying to work it out now.
That's very true, Andy. And I think this is something we've talked about a lot over the last year or so. The fact that the US has had, with COVID and the travel restrictions the last few years, they've played mostly against CONCACAF opponents, World Cup qualifying, had a couple of games against Uruguay and Morocco, not their full strength teams, and haven't really been tested in a world kind of global level like they have been in previous cycles and previous times before going to the World Cup, where you kind of knew where they were stacking up. And now they face Japan and Saudi Arabia, two teams going to the World Cup, and it looked really bad in both games. And I think it's a huge wake-up call to think, hang on a minute, we've been living in almost like a CONCACAF bubble, if you will, for the last few years. And now, injuries aside, I get it, there's a few big injuries. But realistically, 3 or 4 of those guys might come into the starting lineup if they're fit enough. But there's not going to be a huge difference between the team we saw today and the team that kicks off against Wales in 53 days' time in Qatar. So huge concern. I'm going to get to the questions. There's so many great questions coming in. One of them kind of relates from Kazim here. Are Pfock and Sargent locks because the rest of the nines were bad, and these two play against World Cup players in their leagues every week? Nick, do you want to take that? Because I think this is like a larger question for us, right? Who impressed? Who struggled? I think it was difficult for all the strikers over these two games. Not many chances created. Pepe had a very low number of touches in the first half. Felt a bit sorry for him. But what are your takes on the striker situation? Because I know we're all huge Jordan Pfock fans here at PST, right?
What's funny is that I would consider myself, yes, a fan of how he plays, but it's almost like if you say huge, I almost feel like I'm a stretch. It's just the guy who looks like the best chance of producing something. Pepe was fine, I would say. Like he's just not proven himself at this level. He's not scoring against, and the same is true for Jesus Ferreira, who I thought was bright and rifled off a good shot soon upon coming into the game. I do want veterans. I want guys playing against the best area. And on days like today where Pulisic doesn't have it, and Weston McKennie, 2 games in a row where I thought he was trying to outdo himself with giveaways on bad parts of the field. I actually felt bad. I thought, let me point out a couple of bright spots. I thought Tyler Adams was largely pretty good in a role that doesn't suit him very well. I think he needs a little bit of help. And with Weston and Kellen Acosta, you're putting a couple brawlers out there. So to judge the forwards on today is kind of difficult, but at the same time, you just look at the resumes, and at some point you have to stop pretending you have a system. There is no system here. They don't look like they're doing anything. I'm not trying to be mean. I want them to win. I'm getting angry because the World Cup is literally my favorite thing in the world. And right now, no one should be shaking, thinking, are we going to get out of this group? With all due respect to Wales and Iran, who can play, and anybody can have a good day in the World Cup. If you're thinking the U.S. is not the second most talented team in the group, I think you're probably one of those people who wants them to be bad. And I'm really upset because I think they need to take that Wales game to put as little on the Iran game as possible, because Iran has a couple of guys who can really threaten your back line. And I am not right now even as rough as England's been, they're scoring goals. And our best chances over as United States players over the last 4 days are all shots from distance and one missed header from Ferreira.
Yeah, it's been rough. It's been rough for sure. Andy, let's focus on some of the superstars of this US team. I'm talking about obviously Pulisic, McKennie, Adams, but I want to give everyone an update on Gio Reyna first, because he came out in the 30th minute, walked straight down the tunnel. Never a good sign, especially of him, given his recent injury history and record. And apparently it was muscle tightness. He put his hand up, he kicked the ball out himself, took himself out. And it's a huge blow, but hopefully not a big one. And he's kind of taken himself out of the realms of doing serious damage long term. But we're talking about a young talent who's meant to take over the mantle from Christian Pulisic one day, if not now. And he cannot seem to trust his body to play 2 games in a few days. I mean, he's been out for a while, so maybe he'll get to that stage and go back to Dortmund, get some minutes playing. But how much of a concern is that for the US heading into the World Cup, where they have 3 group stage games in a week? You'd want Gio Reyna to be playing the majority of all of those games, and it doesn't seem like he can do that, right? So the update is positive. He came off. It could have been worse, but as of right now, we'll keep you updated on Pro Soccer Talk on NBCSports.com with the latest news from Berhalter and reaction to that. As of right now, it looks okay, but it's still not great, is it, for his confidence levels and for the US team overall?
Yeah, I mean, do you want him playing the majority of those games though in the group stage? I guess is the question, not because of the injuries, but because I mean, it's been about a year and a half since he's really played, regularly. And I know he's had a couple of good performances for Dortmund in the Champions League, but I think we need a higher standard than that and a little bit longer of a track record before I am just going to be willing to jump in and say, all right, get him back in the lineup for the most important games. We can trust him to be healthy, to impact the game, all of those things, because it's been quite a while since we've really seen it from him. So I guess, and that's not to be down on Gio Reyna. That's just to say that I'm not really counting on too much from him right now, because I don't think you can. I don't think realistically you can have expectations of him at this World Cup. Whatever you get from him at this point, it's almost a bonus.
He's also 19, and I think that, and that's not a shot at him. It's to say, I don't know that he's of the caliber at this point in his career that even if he was healthy at 19, I'd be saying all 3 games. I like him to start one of the games, and I probably like him to play in every game, but I just don't know. Not that there aren't 19-year-olds who won't make difference. His club teammate, Jude Bellingham, may make the same commitment with England, but I think he'll play. I think they'll have a rotation of 4 guys. And the number one position that's going to change is going to be the winger opposite Pulisic, and maybe center forward, because they just don't know what they have there somehow.
I mean, Reyna's got the quality, right? If he is fit, for me, he should always be in the US team. I think he has that X factor and has something that the other attackers just don't really have. Even Pulisic and Aronson are different type of players, right? But Reyna gives you that poise and ability on the ball, and should be playing in a number 10 role, in my opinion, and not out on the wing. I don't feel like he really that's in the international game. I don't think that suits him very well. But I mean, it's going to be interesting. There's a lot of great comments and questions coming in. Andy, I want to ask you about McKennie and Adams as well. What did you think? Nick thought Adams played well. I thought he had a couple of decent chances to score, right? He had that one shot just went wide, another one blocked. A couple of uncharacteristic giveaways, which a lot of US players kind of had in that midfield defensive third. But McKennie started well, but faded again. He's still, again, not playing regularly for Juve. So another US player and star player like Pulisic, like Reyna, that not great for them going into a World Cup, right, in this kind of form.
No, it's definitely not. And the midfield was super interesting to me today for the Yunus Musa reason that we already kind of talked about a little bit. But when you get Adams playing as a lone true defensive midfielder, you put a lot more stress on him as a passer, as a distributor out of the back. And obviously that's not the strength of his game. And so a couple of the giveaways were very worrying. But even more worrying to me is that you put a defensive midfielder, not the best on the ball, with a center back behind him and to his left, I should say, that's much worse on the ball. And so 2/3 of the spine, 2/3 of the foundation of the entire team, and I guess you could throw Matt Turner in there because he's more known for his shot stopping, is quite, not poor, but a little underwhelming on the ball and how they're going to distribute out of the back. It's not always going to be on target. It's not always going to be on time, I think, is probably the more important part of it. They're not always going to turn the right way. There's a lot that can go wrong when you've got a center back and a defensive midfielder at the base of the formation that are struggling on the ball. And the thing that you're trying to do is build up possession and create chances that way. Like, it's not a surprise whatsoever if you look at the personnel in the starting lineup and say, well, this team's going to struggle to get the ball into the final third. And if they do, it's going to be out by the corner flags because the fullbacks got really far forward. And then they're going to do nothing from that, give the ball away, and it's going back the other direction. Like, you could see that the second the lineup came out, and it's exactly how the game played out. So, it's not the best performances individually from them, but at the same time, it's hard to keep dogging on the players when it feels like very few, if any, are being put in a real position to succeed, I think, is my biggest issue with what we saw, especially from these two games.
And Nick, you have some comments from Bill Harter coming in after that reaction to wrap up this Saudi Arabia chat.
Yeah, he said that they're not as confident as they like. He thought they might have been worried about roster spots, and we're showing that the connections are not there like they want. Intensity and effort was excellent. They need to keep improving, but confidence is a tricky thing. When the guys are playing confident, I know we're a dangerous team. Today, you almost saw them thinking on the field. And this goes back to kind of his out against Japan, where he said they were lacking personality. I wouldn't expect him to have answers after the game. I wouldn't expect him to say if he had an answer in his head after the game, because at this point, you definitely keep it to your chest. But he doesn't sound like a man who has answers. When you go back to personality and confidence, that's JV stuff.
The lack of confidence thing, though, is very real. Again, I wrote about it in my reaction on NBCSports.com for this game. The lack of confidence and just belief, I think, is the key word with this US team right now. I don't know if the players believe in what they're doing. I think that's the main takeaway for me from these last two games, is that there is a lack of belief in the system and a lack of fluidity. Yes. And the fact that if you think about how often these players have actually played alongside each other over the last few years due to different injury issues, different rosters, and all the rest of it, it's a huge, huge concern. And Andy, final point on this before we switch gears a little bit, but the main word is concern and worry, right?
Yeah, whose job is it to give players confidence? And when we say confidence, I think a lot of people take it to mean, oh, he's played recently and he's played well, so he feels confident that he's going to play well. But I think a lot of what player confidence on a micro level means is that there is a full working understanding for everybody on the field of exactly what is expected, of how they're supposed to play, where they're supposed to be, but also how they read and understand their teammates and where they're going to be. Like, the greatest confidence you can have on the field is, I have the ball, I'm under pressure, I know exactly where Yunus Musa is going to be, I know exactly where Weston McKennie is going to be in this situation, because we have worked on this, that when I come under pressure in this area of the field, this is the rotation so that we can keep the ball and move out of trouble. And that just doesn't seem to exist with this team. It always seems like the players are having to work out the answers and solve the problems, find solutions. Find solutions was the phrase that came up, I believe, from Tyler Adams after the game against Japan. It feels like the players are the ones that have to find the solutions with this team. And let me know if I'm wrong, but I don't feel like that should be the case on the fly in these final two games before a World Cup.
No, definitely. And I think you saw a lot of these players basically just playing within themselves and playing not to be injured and make sure we're going to be okay to get to Qatar. But that's not the way it should be in these games. Easy to say, but there's no form from the US. And some really good comments. I mean, that one on the screen right there is perfectly sums it up. I think too many of our big players have had bad situations with their club teams. And that segues us nicely now on to talking about what is the USMNT's best 11 for the World Cup. Who should start that first game against Wales in Qatar? I mean, there's no more additions, lads. That's it. What we've seen today, that's in the books. The cycle of the last few years is done. Greg Bohart has seen whatever he's seen from so many players. Let's see if we can agree or disagree on a starting lineup. Let's go through it. everyone in the comments get involved as well. This is a group project. Intrigued to see what you guys think about the starting lineup. I'm sure we're all going to agree. But maybe chuck in now your best 11s in the comments section, who you want to see in goal, defensively, in midfield, and attack. I think at this point, we all know that he's going to go for a 4-3-3 formation, right? That's what he always has done as a coach. It's what the US pretty much has always done. Whether they should or not, I can see Andy raising his eyebrows is another matter. But yeah, I mean, let's start with the goalkeeper there. I mean, is Julio right? I mean, Matt Turner, has he elevated himself above Zach Steffen the last 2 games? Good shot stopping, still not the best of his feet. Zach Steffen's probably better of his feet. But as we said before, Matt Turner's probably going to play 5 games in the Europa League, 1 in the League Cup between now and the World Cup. He should be sharp enough. So I'm going to go with Matt Turner being the starting goalkeeper. As much as I like Steffen, I think Turner's ahead of him now. Do we both agree with this? Andy's nodding his head.
Yeah, I think so. I think what we learned from these 2 games is as the competition level and the stakes go up, the U.S. men's national team goalkeeper is going to face a lot of shots. And so having a good shot stopper, the better of the 2 shot stoppers back there, I think is going to be more important. We're going to see more shots against the U.S. goal than chances to really build out of the back, where Zach Steffen over Matt Turner would make a clear difference. So I do think Turner has, by playing solidly as well, not letting in any bad goals, not having any mistakes. We've seen a lot of mistakes from Steffen, whether for the U.S. or for club teams. So I think it's Matt Turner for sure.
Steffen scares me a little bit in terms of his command of the box as well. I think we've seen that a few times, not just in a U.S. shirt, but in a Middlesbrough shirt. And Matt Turner is a confident guy who's going to go up and get the ball right now. Not to say Steffen can't do it. It's just alarming to be at a statement for really the first time in my USMNT fandom where there isn't a out-and-out star goalkeeper there. And that, too, is scary because whether it's Keylor Navas or Milan Borja coming ahead, these teams, and Memo Ochoa a few World Cups ago, CONCACAF goalkeepers have been a strong part of what gets teams out of their group.
Absolutely. Julio has given us a team there. I've just counted it very quickly. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think there might be 12 players on that team. Julio,
that's what we need.
I think that is how they're going to win the World Cup potentially, or at least get out of the group. But yeah, I like that, to be honest. I think we could agree with most of that. Turner in goal, Robinson left back, Anthony Robinson, that's a lock. Sergino Dest right back, I think that's a lock as well. Zimmerman at this point is going to start a centre back. Again, he was okay today, not bad. And then it's just that spot alongside him, which we've been discussing for months, if not years, it feels like. Yeah. I would have Tim Ream, like that comment says there from Dalton. I would have him in the squad, but I would have him starting. I think watching the last few games, the fact they need some composure and somebody there. But I mean, Chris Richards, is he the obvious choice if he's fit enough, Andy, and gets some minutes with Palace? That's the only issue of him. He's not going to play. The other option is Carter Vickers, exactly, who's going to play week in, week out for Celtic and going to be playing in the Champions League. So I would go with Carter Vickers and or Tim Ream. But
I mean, perfect world, Chris Richards gets a bunch of minutes and it becomes him just, automatically. I think that's probably ultimately what happens because I think he's above the pecking order slightly than Carter Vickers. He's going to need minutes though, obviously, to get that. But a quick aside, how great must it be to be Walker Zimmerman right now? Like completely,
challenging you.
He can't be criticized whatsoever because of the situation next to him. So whether he's fantastic or not, Walker Zimmerman, never gonna get the criticism that whoever he plays alongside does.
Yeah, I mean, I think Chris Richards is the obvious choice, right? I think, but if he's not playing, then Carter Vickers is a very good backup, or another very good option, who's going to be playing regularly. Again, I like Tim Ream. I think he's a great player. I think he's proved that. And the one thing, I thought he'd struggle at the start of this Premier League season. He's been excellent for Fulham. Fulham have been excellent, and he's in form. So I don't know why. And Berhalter knows him, and the other players around him know him. I mean, he plays next to Anthony Robinson on the left side of Fulham's defence in the Premier League. So I think that's a bit of a no-brainer to at least have him in the squad. But anyway, midfield, Nick, I mean, kind of picks itself, right? Weston McKennie, Tyler Adams as the and Musa as the midfield trio? We got any arguments for that?
I don't, unless Luca De La Torre goes on gets some real run in that Celta Vigo team.
Okay, so in attack, who would be your 3 forwards?
Well, I'm gonna go with Pulisic. Not obviously. Johnny, sorry, we got a little kid interruptist here. Pulisic at right wing, Aronson at left wing, and I'm actually starting Pfalk up top, but I also don't think that's going to happen. So I would use Tim Weah at center forward. Weah.
Oh, Andy, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, this is where the formation, the system actually comes into play. The 4-3-3, obviously, it's not going away. I think you could say more of a 4-2-3-1, where you've got a 10 on the field. You've got Gio Reyna, who can actually get underneath and combine with a center forward, and you can get the ball out wide to the wingers as well. It provides a little bit more width through the attack, not just through the fullbacks. I think we've almost stuck ourselves behind the 8 ball by deciding that the width of attack is only going to come from the fullbacks. So having said all that, I think it's probably the pretty obvious stock answer. Pulisic on one side, Aronson on the other, and who knows in the middle. I think it will probably – the fact that Pepe got the opportunity in this game, I think said a lot about Berhalter wants him to be that guy, wanted him to take that opportunity. Obviously don't think that he probably did in this game, but if you kind of compare – what every center forward has done in that position for the national team over the last X number of months, I don't think anybody has a clear advantage. The only thing that I think could change that between now and the World Cup that would make it not Pepe would be if Pfalk doesn't just go scores a boatload of goals for Union Berlin. And at that point, it gets to, well, I can't ignore him any longer, have to call him in, and then actually have to play him.
I think it would take a lot now for him, though, to backtrack on not calling up Pfalk to this squad, and from his comments, well, what's that, Nick?
It shouldn't. This goes back to the stubbornness. If even honestly, tell me this, Joe, if an England player with any sort of real fire to his name, with any sort of backing whatsoever in the Premier League, scored 2 goals a game or a goal a game, would the English media not be calling for him to get the last spot just in case that form is needed in England?
I don't know. There's a very different situation going on here, but very similar in other ways with some of the players.
Pick another position. Sorry, yeah.
But yeah, you're right, and I think again, I'm saying it should be the case, but I don't think it will be. I think that Berhalter has been stubborn enough at this point to leave him out, even when he's leading the line for the team that's leading the Bundesliga and having a great start to the season, which. Yeah, I mean, it was crying out, I think, for a player like him in this attack where you've got Pulisic, you've got potentially Weah, you've got Reyna, Aronson, putting balls into the box. You need a player just a pure finisher, and I don't get it. I mean, right, Andy?
Every player you just named there fits a 4-2-3-1 100 times better than a 4-3-3. And I know it sounds like that's such a small change, but if you really think about the personnel and you're saying these are our best players, because that's kind of what we're doing right here. Like, what is the lineup going to be? This is the best player in this position, this position, this position. If you want to maximize each one of those individually, then put them into a system that fits all of them, not none of them. Like, why are we doing this?
I agree with you. And James says that point very, very clearly in the comments. There should be a 4-2-3-1. And I think we all agree that with the players that you have, that is the best system right now. And I'd love to see Pfalk up top and then just kind of let Pulisic, Aronson, Weah or Reyna, depending on who's fit and who's in form, just let loose and run wild. And that means you kind of sacrifice Yunus Musa maybe in that midfield trio that becomes just McKennie and Adams, or does McKennie miss out, or there's some way that you can calibrate that.
Situationally, I think it's also really good because you've got such different options in there that, you know, a game that you're going to have a ton of possession, like against Saudi Arabia today, maybe you get Musa in there instead of McKennie. And so you've got the natural ball progressor. Like, it's just, I know it's easier said with hindsight and playing the game on paper and everything, but these are really simple changes that feel like, and we have no way of knowing or testing it ourselves, but feel like would have a big impact on this team.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure. I mean, the big question that I wanted to ask you guys really and finish this segment with and get everybody in the comments involved, I think this is going to be the topic that dominates the discussion around the USMNT, right, between now and the World Cup and during the World Cup. What is a successful World Cup for the US? What do they need to achieve for it to be deemed a success? Or what can they achieve? I mean, Nick Mendola, what do you think is actually achievable now? It's difficult after the last couple of games. A few weeks ago, I think it would have been a bit different, but your answer to this. But
step one is score a goal. That would be good. Scoring a goal against a team that isn't like Granada, no offense to Granada, would be a real step forward. This team does not score against good teams. And Christian Pulisic, some people were trying to make something of him not dapping up Berhalter as he left the pitch today, but he has said in interviews, and we know he's not shy about sharing his thoughts, he said in interviews that they don't have ideas. So at this point, I'm moving the goalposts. And I'm saying if they get out of the group, it is a success for the group, not a coach-saving success, but if they can get out of the group, it is a success. Anything else is not, because that's the state of this program. That's where we're supposed to be. And even with a very young midfield like this, just find a way to finish above Wales and Iran.
Wow. I mean, yeah, Abdullah's saying that their round of 16 is enough. I think round of 16 at this point, Andy, that what we've just seen the last two games would be a very good achievement. And yeah I think I'm taking a deep breath here because I'm trying to think about all the US fans out there who are watching this and watched along with us today. And just the negativity that's been around the program for a while now just doesn't seem to have abated whatsoever, even though qualifying for the World Cup was an achievement. But with this young team, the talent they have, getting out of the group should be the bare minimum. But right now, that seems an achievement to me. And I think if the US makes it to the last 16, they've almost exceeded the expectations right now, given the form that their players are in and how they're playing under Berhalter. Is that fair enough? I mean, what do you think they can achieve, this team, in the World Cup?
It's up to Greg. Like it really, really feels like it's up to Greg at this point. You know, we for years we talked about, well, you know, we don't have players at the top clubs or playing in the top leagues. You know, we've got guys just kind of sprinkled all over the place. We need players at the highest level, you know, doing things that American players have never done. We've got that. We've got more, young players coming through the youth international teams, coming through the domestic league, getting to Europe at a much younger age than has ever been. Like all of the things that are in place to show real progress as a program. That's what I've come back to this entire kind of World Cup cycle was. We know this is a young team. We know this is a team that's building, obviously want to do well in Qatar, but really, truly, and for the sport in this country, building towards the 2026 World Cup when it's on home soil, when it's in Mexico, when it's in Canada as well. And so this is, to me, is about progress, and each one of them showing that they are a World Cup quality player and that this team can grow over the course of an entire World Cup cycle. I think there have been moments and periods of that where we have seen them bounce back and respond to poor performances in a positive way that we didn't necessarily expect at the time. Like, we've been this down on this team a number of times throughout the World Cup cycle, and I think it's important to remember that they have always answered the bell and always come back from that. And so I do still believe that there is enough talent in this team. There are players that have shown themselves for the U.S. men's national team that they are good enough to play at a World Cup. It is now about the coach. Please, Greg, just put these players in the right position to succeed. And I don't just mean positions on the field, but every little detail. This is not about you, Greg. This is not about your system or your style or proving to anyone that you were right, or even proving that you were the right guy for the job. This is just about getting the team to have success at this World Cup, because I remember 2010 was my first real kind of out in the World Cup experience. I remember what that was like around Kansas City. I remember what 2014 was like in Kansas City when that team they didn't play the best stuff. They played some awful stuff, but they did well at the World Cup, and that's what it was about. That's all we want. That is all we want. So to answer what they can achieve, they can get out of the group, I think, if they just play to something close to their potential. The problem is we've not seen that for a while from this team now.
Yeah, you just want them to play to their strengths, and like you said, put systems to one side and just basically have the coach put them in the right combinations on the pitch, have some kind of game plan to get through that group stage. I mean, Dalton's got it all figured out in the comments there. Win against Wales, draw against England, and find something against Iran, and then you maybe finish second. Again, England hasn't been playing great. Wales hasn't been playing great. Iran had a good result the other day. So maybe they're the dark horses in that group that no one's really talking about. But this is go time now. The last few years, this young group of players, I mean, I remember a few years ago before Bill Harter came in, it's pretty much been this squad, right, that Dave Sarachan had after the debacle of not qualifying for the last World Cup. These players have been given opportunities and chances to grow, and they're not quite there yet. And that's okay. The quality of the players is the best group and pool of players that the US has had at one time for a very long time, maybe ever, right? And that's how we're looking to the 2026 World Cup to be the big moment. Games on home soil. And that is going to be the measuring stick for this group of players. And I think it's okay to admit this World Cup might not be the one, but it will hold them in good stead going forward, like you said, Andy, to get the experience to really go to the next level. So a lot of the comments are basically mirroring it. It's going to be a miracle if we can get out of the group. Manager situations. There's another question there. I wonder what Klinsmann would have done with this squad. I don't think we can go down that rabbit hole right now, but there is a lot to like about this team. Not trying to be too down on them. It's difficult after two displays and results like we've seen against Japan and Saudi Arabia. But I think a successful World Cup for the USMNT would be getting out of the group stage. And then you never know, right? They've done it in the past. They've gone on runs and teams go on runs.
You'd like to hear a tacit acknowledgement that they absolutely have backslid since the end of qualification. That acknowledgement. And if you won't give me that field goal post, then move it back to how we felt after they not outclassed, but outperformed Mexico, and that extra time, middle of the night thriller. And then 2 months later, won the Gold Cup with a completely different side against Mexico. The vibes then, what we were hearing about when Musa committed to the team, when we heard about how everybody in that camp was fired up and texting each other and they can't wait to get back for camp. And now they look like they can't wait to get back to their clubs. That's not good. That's not good. And we're talking since June, beat Morocco, draw Uruguay, beat Grenada, draw El Salvador, lose to Japan, draw Saudi Arabia. I want better going into a World Cup. And if this was their best group, or at least 80% their best group, and we just saw these performances, maybe I'd be more interested in writing it off, right? Yeah. But I'm not. I'm very, very down right now.
But there is a lot to like about this group, for sure.
You're correct there. Yes.
We have seen enough from them quality-wise to give us hope. It's the hope that kills you, right? I mean, for the US and the next 54 days or so, there's going to be so much talk about which players deserve to be in the squad when that's named in early November. And over at Pro Soccer Talk on NBC Sports, NBCSports.com, the three lads on the screen will keep you updated of all the latest roster news. Nick has his player pool rankings, which is going to be updating to see who's moving up and down, who's hot, who's not. And I really enjoyed that segment. Thanks so much to everyone in the comments for getting involved and sending in your starting lineups and which players you'd like to see in certain positions. And the main takeaway is nothing's set in stone right now, especially at centre-back and especially in attack for the US. So there's going to be a lot for Greg Berhalter and the staff to sort out. Whether or not you think he's the right man in the job, he's going to be in charge of the World Cup. That's pretty clear. It's going to be a lot for them to figure out and fine-tune in the days and weeks leading up to the World Cup kicking off in Qatar. Let's change gears now and focus on that World Cup in Qatar, lads. I've been ranking the World Cup teams, the 32 teams who've qualified, 32-1 over at PST. You can check out that article now and hammer me, everyone, in the comments for that. But we wanted to discuss who are the clear favourites. I mean, we're going to focus on the top 10 here, but get your questions and your answers coming in the comments section, lads, and everyone else out there. Who do we think is the favourites to win the World Cup? I'm intrigued to see people in the comments here. Are there any clear favourites? Are there any teams that have really put themselves above the competition and you think they're definitely going to go all the way? Because I would have said a few months ago, there probably isn't. And there's a solid group of 7-8 teams who are above the rest, but I don't know. You could flip a coin and any of those teams could win it. But Andy, I'm going to come to you. There seems to be a few teams in the last two windows, really, who've just elevated their level, and their players, especially at club level, have taken it to a whole new level. And go ahead and tell me who you think are the favorites to win the World Cup in Qatar.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a boring answer because they're the betting favorites right now, and I think everybody is expecting a lot from them. But I'm looking at the Brazil squad that was recently called up, and the forward group, lethal. The midfield group, as hard-nosed and technically skilled as well as could possibly be, and the defense really solid at all the clubs that you want to have, especially defenders playing at their club. It just feels like everything, and the goalkeeper situation being as rich as it is for Brazil as well, it just feels like everything has lined up perfectly. We talked about, a golden generation with the U.S. men's national team. It feels like this is kind of a combination of almost two, pretty good generations from Brazil, because there's a lot of very young players in the squad, and there's a lot of players on kind of the back end of their career. But I think when you put those two things together, you've got experience, you've got youthful hunger that's going to push on those veterans. It just feels like the balance, everything for Brazil, aside from the fact that it's Brazil and things can blow up pretty quickly, especially at international tournaments. It feels like everything's pointing towards Brazil for me at the moment.
Yeah, I totally agree. A great comment there from Eddie. I mean, the thing, it's deep and talented and the solid defense, right, Nick? That's the difference, I think, for this Brazilian side this time around. And one of the other favorites in my mind, Lionel Messi's Argentina, they figured things out defensively at the back as well. And they actually give him a platform to go and win a game, right? They'll win games 1-0. We saw him win the Copa America. Doing it that way. They have so many talented attackers and have done over the years, but it's always been defending has been a problem. But they figured it out, right, Nick? So Brazil and Argentina, the two South American powerhouses, they've elevated themselves over the last few months and seem to be the clear favorites. You agree with that?
I do, especially because France has struggled in the last few months. I think France, talent-wise, very much a U.S. situation. In fact, right now, I just got a little lift from what you said about the U.S., right? Like right now, I'm thinking, okay, maybe the talent is still to get rearranged, because I'm not going to rule out Brazil, so I guess I shouldn't rule out the U.S. exceeding expectations. But how about this? When the World Cup starts, Brazil will have played 30 matches in the 2 years prior, going back to November 2019. They will have lost twice, both 1-0 losses to Argentina. So, I mean, this is... That is special. 30 games with 4 draws, 2 losses, and the losses only being to a very good Argentina team. However, I know France, they just dodged relegation, and that happens to the best of us, right, Joe? Out of the Nations League. But
it's still too soon. Still too soon.
France has also in the last calendar year beaten Belgium, beaten Spain, and really done their homework in other games. So I mean, Kylian Mbappe might be the best player in the world right now. Might be. Yeah. I know Holland has a claim there as well, and De Bruyne has a claim, but they have Griezmann coming off the bench. Giroud in a blue shirt is suddenly timeless. It's like he goes back to his Arsenal days, his peak Arsenal days when he pulls on the France shirt. And this is a team that, like you mentioned with Brazil, they call it their B team, and you still think they're going deep into the tournament.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible to think about those two teams and sort of the generational talents they've had with Neymar and Messi, and just never been able to get in the structure around them. And now they have that, and you can clearly see how deep they are by the players are not even calling up to these squads, right? With the Arsenal contingent not even getting a look in this time, but they're clearly going to be in the thinking there for Chichi. But this is so difficult because France, a lot of people in the comments are bringing them up and saying, they haven't been great recently. A lot of managers now, when it comes to the Nations League, especially in Europe, when we look at France, we look at Spain, we look at England, we look at Germany, their main focus was on trying new players or trying combinations or giving players minutes who haven't been playing regularly for their club teams. They want to give them minutes ahead of the World Cup. And so France is a really good shout that they shouldn't be slipping down. They're the reigning world champions for a reason. A lot of great players, deep squad. Didier Deschamps has proven to be a very, very good tournament manager, which you need. You need that experience of going deep. Andy, I've got Belgium really high. I've got Belgium up to third. Yeah. And Portugal and Netherlands round out the top 6.
Yes.
You have any issues with those teams or any teams that you really are high on?
No, actually the Netherlands, and I'm glad you Perfect transition there, Joe. It feels like Louis Van Gaal, back in the job. It's by the way, it's just great to have him back. I think in like a capacity as important as a top 10 nation manager at a World Cup. I think the sport is better off for that. But the way that this team is set up, really good center backs all the way across the back, all really good on the ball. And if you look at the international game and the way it's played, it's about quickness. It's about counterattacking. This is a team that doesn't really have a recognized center forward. They've got a lot of wingers that kind of play as secondary forwards. This feels like a team that's going to set up to just defend and counter, and they are going to be so difficult to stop, I think, if they fully commit to playing that way under Louis Van Gaal. And at that point, like we could be talking about Memphis Depay, 4 or 5 transfers moved on from leaving Manchester United, which he got that move, by the way, from two previous World Cup. Like the irony and the poetic justice, I guess, of the World Cup. That would be kind of perfect for a team like the Netherlands. They missed the last World Cup as well, so this is a really big tournament for them. And if you kind of compare where they're at compared to the U.S. having missed the last World Cup, what were we doing with all of our time, and what were they doing with theirs?
Yeah, it's a very good point. I want to chuck this question out to the comments section. Any dark horses, any teams that you guys think are going to stun everyone and surprise everyone? Because there's always a couple, right? There's always a couple of teams that come from nowhere. I mean, is it Costa Rica a few tournaments ago? That just came from absolutely nowhere. We obviously had Ghana before as well. I'm going to go through my rankings and just say there's a few teams, obviously I mentioned that England, Germany, and Spain, who have the talent and quality in theory to go deep, but the form and maybe just missing that one key player. I think in England, missing really a dominant centre-back. Germany, they probably score goals, but sometimes I do worry about them sometimes that they're going to score enough. And then Spain, again, the same issue for them. Morata, is not prolific, and who else do they have up top there? Again, a very good team on their day, those 3 teams. And then I'm looking at the group just outside of them. We've got Denmark, Croatia, Senegal, those kind of teams, Uruguay. Nick, any of those teams you see making a really, really big push and surprising us all in Qatar?
Well, yeah, I think Senegal has a pretty good chance. They have rung up some really good experiential wins, right? They stopped Mohamed Salah famously in Egypt from getting the World Cup. They stopped them from collecting a Cup of Nations, right? I mean, this is a team under Sadio Mane who has done it. And when you start to look at the players that they have in the fold in the midfield, that Premier League spirit can really come across. Ganagwe, Mendy from Leicester City, Kouyaté, and even what's the name of the guy, Sarr, that Tottenham signed. But I think they have a lot of players that I think can really contribute. And Sadio Mane, we know what the pressure he puts on back lines. Koulibaly at the back, and again in an A group that, as long as it's not fixed for Qatar, I think we can be in a pretty good spot. The other team I would want to mention, Joe, another Premier League heavy team, is Portugal. I can't count them as a dark horse because they've won Euro in recent memory, but that is a terrific collection of talent there who always seems to have the right spirit when they come together.
That's true. And we got a question about Canada specifically, talking about dark horses and seeing what they did in CONCACAF qualifying. Andy, what do we think about them? Obviously, they lost against Uruguay tonight, but had another impressive win the other day before that. So they're doing okay. Canada's Canada, right? We speak about it on the show a lot. We're big fans of them. That's a team that plays to their strengths and plays to the strength for the squad of players they have and a system. And they just understand what they need to do, understand what the bloke next to them on the pitch is doing, and it worked. I mean, you got some stars there. David, obviously, Larin, Alphonso Davis out wide is, a generational talent in his own right. So what can they do? I mean, it's their first World Cup, so in a long, long, long time. And I know people in Canada north of the border will be very, very excited about it.
Yeah, sometimes getting to the World Cup is cause for celebration enough. And I think Canada probably should keep that in mind, I think, going into this World Cup. And that's not to be disrespectful. I'm looking at their recent results from 2021 and 2022. The teams that they have beaten are not good teams. They've beaten a Qatar team. They've beaten Curacao, Jamaica, El Salvador, the U.S., Honduras, Mexico, Costa Rica, Panama. They have not beaten any team that kind of level of quality that they're going to come up against at a World Cup. And so we talk about the U.S. dominating, or not dominating, but looking a lot better in CONCACAF play against that level of competition, and then seeing the step up to some other World Cup qualified teams and how they've struggled. I think it's going to be a similar story for Canada, but the fact that they are at the World Cup, like I pleaded with Greg Berhalter earlier, give us that moment, give us that opportunity to believe in the team to chase something at this World Cup. I think is probably, I mean, it is the most powerful thing that exists in this sport on a global level. And so the fact that Canada is going to get to have that, I think, is probably something to celebrate, because they're, once the games begin, I don't know how much there will be.
Nick, here's a good question to finish on. Who is going to be CONCACAF's sort of best hope and best chance of doing well at this World Cup? USA, Mexico, Canada? Who's going to go the furthest? Because, I mean, I have the USA in these rankings at 20th out of 32. I have Mexico at 17, and I have Canada at 23. So have I got Mexico too high there? Have I got the USA too low, maybe based on these two performances recently? I mean, who do you see really I guess prepping well for the next World Cup on home soil, right? That's a big thing for these three teams as well.
Yeah, look, Costa Rica is in a very bad group. They're out. It's just the way it is. I know to do that twice in 3 World Cups to get out of it would be such an achievement for Los Ticos. The U.S. has the best chance to get out of its group in terms of looking at the opposition around them. But for basically the other 45 minutes of this conversation, we'll detail why that could be a chance. I don't think Canada's getting out because they open with Belgium and Croatia. It's not like they need to get a point from one of those to get out of the group before getting to Saudi Arabia. So I'm looking at Mexico. I think they've arguably underperformed for much of qualifying. I think they have a good tactical manager, whatever you want to say about some of the choices he's made. And if they can get past Poland, that's going to be it. That first game might be CONCACAF's most important one of the tournament if the U.S. plays like it did today. If Mexico gets past Poland, they'll get out of the group. But that is a big ask. Lewandowski against Memo.
It's going to be tough. I mean, Costa Rica's group is a nightmare, like you said. So I'm not going to say all 4 CONCACAF teams are up against it, but it very much, given the recent form of the US, I mean, they, again, were the best hope, I think, to get out of the group stages, given the group stage draw for Canada and Mexico in particular, as well as Costa Rica. So it's going to be tough, but, gents, it's been a journey the last few years. We have seen everything that we could have seen from the US. They've qualified, they've warmed up for the tournament, and now in 54 days, it all kicks off in Qatar. And of course, you can watch in Spanish across the NBC family of channels, NBC Universo, stream the games on Peacock, at Pro Soccer Talk on NBCSports.com. We'll keep you updated of all the latest news, how to watch information, previews, analysis on every single game in the World Cup. The 3 lads you can see on the screen, we're watching everything. Can't wait to do more of these live chats between now and then and during the World Cup. So thanks everyone for joining us for this special Pro Soccer Talk live today. Nick and Andy, thanks so much for your expert analysis and insights as always. And even if it wasn't a positive day for the US men's national team, it's always positive we can get together and chat about the beautiful game and with everyone in the comments. So thanks so much for getting involved, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll speak to you all very soon indeed. Cheers, guys.